In our very first Broadway Unscripted roundtable today, we are asking, is Broadway pricing out the very audiences that support it? The Broadway League just released its 2024-25 demographic report, and the numbers tell a story producers may not want to hear. For 3 decades, Broadway depended on suburban audiences driving in from the outer boroughs, New Jersey, Westchester, Long Island, Connecticut, the Bridge and Tunnel crowd, we call it. That era seems to be over. Suburban attendance has collapsed to under 13%, and it is a 30-year low. So who's filling those seats now? Well, according to the numbers, tourists, millionaires, and a shrinking circle of super fans willing to pay upwards of $200, and as we've seen, a lot more. Well, today we are asking, is Broadway pricing out the very audiences that support it? So here with the numbers and what they really mean, our inaugural guests and good friends, Pacheco, a theater journalist, host of Theater All Moving Parts on CUNY TV. He's a writer as well as an author. Patrick has been covering Broadway's business and cultural shifts for 3 long decades, and I worked with him some of those decades proudly. Stephen Suskin is a theater critic, author of 17 books, among them The Sound of Broadway Music and Second Act Trouble, and one of the sharpest analysts of Broadway's financial realities. Stephen and I, full disclosure, are both critics for the very dynamic theater website, New York Stage Review. And we welcome Alexander Robertson. When I say your name, Alex, I want to sing Alexander Robertson.
That's actually how I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Alexander Robertson. Yeah.
It has a ring. You are the future of Broadway, Alex. He is a young phenom producer with a bunch of credits already to his name. I think 10 Broadway, 6 off Broadway. And he is only at the tender age of 27. So all of you, I appreciate you logging in and joining us. All right, that was a long introduction. There were some very interesting numbers in that report, and we all know that Broadway is not a terribly affordable art form. There's that word, affordable. But when you see $276,000 is the average household income for theatergoers to Broadway, what, Patrick, does that say about the industry and its viability? And does that even surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me because it is, quote unquote, said to be an quote unquote elitist form, unquote. That said, I think the statistics also showed that the average age was 41, which of course isn't 70 or 65. And there are some good stuff as well among the statistics. What strikes me is that people have been saying that Broadway is dying or dead for as long as I've been covering, and it's been more than 3 decades. It's probably been more like 5 decades. Richie, in a chorus line, says, I want people to stop talking that Broadway is dead because I just got here. So I think there are some dire problems, and yes, they are financial, but there are some solutions, and I think those will be provided by Alex and other producers like him. And I think you can't look at the statistics through rose-colored glasses, but you can look at them through clear-eyed glasses and see that, yes, there is a future to Broadway, but there are some problems to surmount.
So, on the surface, it sounds like good news. The 14.7 million people attending Broadway shows, which is the second highest. So people are going and they're willing to pay those prices. The total grosses reached an all-time high, $1.89 billion. And we also see that it's the super fans, and those are the diehard fans. They make up 8% of the audience, but these are people seeing 15 or more shows a year, but they account for 40% of the ticket sales. So let me ask you, Alex, do these numbers scare you at all? Because you're going to have to really rely on those diehard fans to attend your shows. And, as we saw in another graph, we're losing suburban audiences, which you folks in the producer ranks have been counting on.
Of course, yeah. I think every year that a report like this comes out, it's very easy to go, oh, things are changing. It's not the same. We're losing people. And I actually see it as an opportunity to look around and see who is presently attending our theaters and strategize how we can continue to elevate the offerings for those people, but offer things for other groups that are not represented in these numbers. It is true that the trends have seen sort of a lack of the suburban audience over this last year. I think there are a lot of things that contribute to those types of trends that aren't just due to Broadway specifically. But that also has given us such a great opportunity to look at audience development in new places. What gets them to a Broadway show? What is their awareness of what is out there that they can attend? And a lot of times I keep hearing this over and over that folks have a hard time choosing what to see because these tickets are a decent price for a lot of folks. And when you're deciding to go see a show and you have a family of four, you're going to take a lot into consideration and you don't want to take the risk on potentially seeing something that's not entertaining or enjoyable. So there are a lot of factors that go into where we are in the market, but I say lean into the change. And if it means that we now have to cater to an audience that is expected to come back over and over, which I love. If you've seen a show and you love it enough to attend over and over again, seeing a different cast member or a different part of the show, maybe, I think that's exciting. And I think we should lean into finding ways how we can continue to get folks to come back in a theater.
Things have changed, obviously. And Stephen, I want to put this one to you because you've been around a while. You've observed the Broadway culture and the Broadway scene, and we're discovering there are fewer musicals being produced, and producers are telling us one of the main reasons is that they cannot afford to to pay these exorbitant costs to mount a production. And perfect example, Queen of Versailles, starring Kristen Chenoweth with music by Stephen Schwartz. It was supposed to be a mega hit. Instead, it became a colossal flop. And producers announced it is closing even sooner, just recently, by 2 weeks. They moved up the closing date than originally planned. And I'm just going to read to you a quote from the producers when they announced that it was folding earlier. They said, unfortunately, the harsh economic realities of new Broadway musicals in a post-COVID landscape have caught up with us. The industry as a whole is no longer seeing the audience behaviors we've relied on to shape our strategies for decades. And this has led us to the painful decision to move our closing earlier to Sunday, December 21st. So, Stephen, let me ask you a question. 20 years ago, would a show like The Queen of Versailles survived?
No.
What's changed?
First of all, it needs to be a good show. Now, there have been a lot of good shows that have not succeeded financially, which is part of what we're discussing. But then there are other shows which just don't work. You had Queen of Versailles, you had Tammy Faye last year, very similar. Part of the problem, I believe, comes from this wonderful thing we have called premium pricing. A hit musical can do $2 million a week or more. So once shows started grossing 2 million or even 3 million on good weeks, the other shows coming along seem to have budgeted themselves on the assumption that, well, if we do $2 million a week, we'll make a lot of money. The fact is, it's only the massive successes, the Hamiltons, the Wickeds, they're the only ones who really can gross 2 million and upward. And other shows, which are good shows and enjoyable shows in which audiences like, they might sell out. They might sell at 1.5 million. Now, they can still make money at 1.5 million, but if they're planning on making the sort of money you make at 2 million or 3 million, you're never gonna. You can't do that. So the budgets have become incredibly high and unrealistic. To produce musicals for $15 million is kind of ridiculous. And 15 million you can't even do anymore. Now it's come to 20 million, 25 million.
20,
Uh, you
26?
know,
Yeah.
26. It's hard to recover $20 million when you're not profiting, 500,000 a week.
I wanted to share this with you because I think you would find it interesting. In real time, the larger conversation of what I think they were saying with that statement for Queen of Versailles, about the current state of the economic pressures, they're not taking ownership for the content of what they're presenting. What they are referring to is their ability to project how long they can continue to run a show. So the audience trend of people buying tickets 6 to 8 months previous to the pandemic was how we were able to calculate that a show could run. Okay, like let's say it's December. We know, okay, I can make it to January. I can make it to end of February. Now in real time, across the board, it's looking like over 50% of the grosses, like for these shows, are happening in the same week, which is very scary because it means we can't in real time predict the whether that audience will show up that week or not. So that is where we're at. That is a very scary pain point that it isn't really being publicly talked about. It's just I know this because I'm in these rooms and these meetings every day, but that's what's actually happening. It's that the audience habits have changed extremely, and we have to figure out a new way to be able to continue to run our shows and project them without knowing what the months ahead will look like for us.
That is
Interesting.
scary. It really
Yeah.
is. I mean, that's really a massive change in the theater buying habits, or the theater goers buying habit. There's no advance.
Well,
Exactly.
going back many years, you always had shows which were hits, which would indeed be sold out in advance. But then you always had shows which, a Monday you didn't know what was going to be coming in.
There's a fun fact that uh, the average price of a Broadway ticket, I suppose, is always, throughout the decades, has always been 10 times the price of a movie ticket.
I think it's more now, but now it used to be. I looked up some figures, something like Gypsy and the original, it was a $9 ticket.
Yeah. When I arrived, Chorus Line was the top ticket when I arrived in New York was
That's
$15.
15, right?
My mom did a segment on one of the shows she was working on. I'll never forget. She said, "Can you believe the act starring Liza Minnelli? They're asking $25 a ticket. Can you believe it?" And she's never even in the show. Remember, she she was always out sick for one reason or another. So it was the understudy, $25. Yeah, right. So, gentlemen, Stephen Suskin, Patrick Pacheco, and Alexander Robertson, thank you all so much for your insights and your expertise. And thank you out there for joining us for our very first Broadway Unscripted conversation. Our next live roundtable topic, critics on critics. That's coming up. Maybe Stephen will join us again. And in future episodes, we're going to investigate all the alternative ways that people can get tickets at a more affordable price. Be sure to follow us, and you can get us on social media at Fifth Row Center. And if you want to log on to our website, it's a little bit different. It is Fifth Row